I think so. On both on the chat and the text, Eric and Lubbock, guys, with all these OLs coming back to Baylor, and Connor Galvin did confirm he is coming back. So Connor Galvin will be back. Jacob Gall will be back. Grant Miller will be back, and I don't think we've heard finally on Khalil Keith yet, Craig, if I'm wrong, but I think he's coming back as well. So 4 to the 5 starting offensive linemen. They just got to fill left guard. But his question is, with all these offensive linemen coming back to Baylor, what are the chances Baylor gets a big-time running back in the portal? I'd want to run behind them and get the numbers that Abram did. That's from Eric and Lubbock. Look, Craig, I don't think they really need to look at that position in the transfer portal. They've got some young guys and some other guys. But, look, I mean, you're not going to say no to anybody if a big-time running back is in the portal.
Yeah, no, I think they're going to look at running back, and I don't know if that means that they'll sign anybody, but I do think they're going to look there because, obviously last year they didn't feel like they had what they needed in the spring, and that's why they went and they made the move with Abram Smith, and big credit to David Wetzel for being the first to suggest that to Jeff Grimes, and I don't know if people heard Jeff Grimes, because we kind of wondered throughout the year, who was the guy that really, broke that piece of information to Jeff Grimes. And for those that maybe never heard it from him, because he did explain it in one of his awards press conferences, one day they're sitting there, it's the end of spring ball basically, there's a few practices left, and I remember back in we actually got to visit and be around during the spring a little bit, and I remember just kind of wondering, they kind of referenced, we need Treston to run straight downhill, we need, it sounded like they had some guys but they didn't really have the guy. And then sure enough, they moved Abram Smith there towards the end of spring ball, and Grimes said that he was around the facility and he was just kind of complaining, airing his grievance over the fact that they just didn't have the right running back to do what they wanted to do. And that's when David Wetzel said, well, hey, Abram Smith, he played running back in high school. He was really good. Of course, that's when he signed with Baylor. He was a running back out of Abilene and had just moved to defense prior to that. And he said he went to Ron Roberts and said, hey, is there any guys on defense you would be willing to part with that you think could help out? And right away, Ron Roberts goes, Abram Smith, absolutely. He would be great for you. Well, would you mind? No, go right ahead. And just, that was it. That's how Abram Smith became the all-time leading rusher in a single season in Baylor history, was that, couple of exchanges. But having said all that, Abram Smith's gone. We know that. That leaves a bunch of young, unproven running backs. And I like Tay McWilliams. I like what little we saw of him, especially earlier in the year. I know that Richard Reese is right up their alley in terms of, what they're looking for as a running back, and he had a really great senior year, but he's still going to be a true freshman coming in. And then there's, a couple of other guys on the roster, like Jonah White, can't seem to stay healthy. And, Craig Williams can't seem to stay healthy. And I don't know how much he's really their style, in this style anyway. So, I think saying all that there's some guys, there's some options, and there's maybe a couple that you feel good about, but I don't think there's anyone surefire enough that you're going to pass up somebody potentially in the portal. I think they'll definitely look at running back. If there's somebody right in there, I think they'll try to throw their hat in the ring. Because again, it's just, kind of unproven right now, even though there is some talent in that running back room. But to get back the offensive linemen they're getting back, wow. I mean, that's massive to get Connor Galvin to kind of be that final domino. And you're right, we're waiting to hear on Khalil Keith, but seems to appear to be, he might be leaning towards coming back. So that would be pretty much the whole crew from a tremendous offensive line this year, and that alone adjusts your expectations mightily for Baylor heading into next season.
Yeah, look, there are teams around the country that transfer portal or no transfer portal, or what would kill that 4 out of 5 offensive linemen back if they were all sophomores. All these guys, you're talking about, you're going to have 4 super seniors essentially along your offensive line, and then the best of the rest. And I would probably think that Micah Moscuza, I think that's how you say his name, is the one who probably takes that left guard spot. He'd be the leader in the clubhouse going into spring. But they all took gigantic leaps forward under Jeff Grimes and Eric Mateos. And, whatever the running back is Tay McWilliams, Jordan Jenkins, or anybody else that you mentioned, or, transfer running back.
I forgot Jenkins, but yeah.
Yeah, Jordan Jenkins to me, might be the guy. I mean, Tay McWilliams will be the starter going into the Springs, but Jordan Jenkins was the high, big-time, stud running back recruit. He's the one. He's the kind of guy who, at 18, looks like he's 24 already, body-wise, and might be able to step in. So we'll see there. I think they've got a lot of potential there, but they're not going to say no to anybody. I would think that if they're going to get in the transfer portal at a skill position, it's probably going to be wide receiver. Considering what they're losing, but.
Yeah, I think they're gonna be open-minded to probably about everywhere. I don't think there's really any position you look at that they wouldn't probably, gander and think about. Okay, we'll see how good. Because really, like wide receiver, they definitely have nothing proven really coming back. There's not like a number one wide receiver or even a top 3 receiver returning. Tight ends. I think you feel good if there's a position that you feel good about, it's probably tight end, because pretty much all those guys appear to be coming back or on schedule to. We'll see. I think Christoph Henley. I don't know what his situation is, but Ben Sims is supposed to come back, and then the rest of the guys are pretty young. But yeah, O-line. You're always going to be adding to the O-line no matter what. Even if everybody comes back, you're still going to always be adding there. So if there's the right guy, maybe that's somewhere that they take a look. But yeah, probably not a tight end, but receiver for sure. Running back, if it's the right guy. Quarterback will be interesting to see how they kind of address that this offseason, if they feel the need to address that. And the defense, I think you're looking at pretty much everywhere where they could add somebody. So yeah, they're going to be heavily involved in the transfer portal. I don't think they're going to go grab 10 guys. Last year was just the 4, and that 4 worked out really well for them. But I wouldn't rule out them taking a transfer running back unless they were to get into the spring and Jenkins and Reese and White and McWilliams and whoever else, unless they just wow them. Which they did not last year, but now you've got, Jordan Jenkins and Richard Reese, et cetera. I would expect that running back will be something they take a long look at. But who's to know who's going to even be in there in that portal? It's been so fast and furious, guys going in, coming out, trying to track that. Maybe there's ultimately somebody they don't like, but if there is, I bet they do give it a look.
Yeah, I think so. And again, I was surprised that they were only at 4 transfers last year, coming off 2-7, which looking back now, knowing what we know now, it means that we like the roster that we have here. And, it really was like COVID was a thing. Of course, we didn't know, you don't really know how much COVID affects or this or that or the coaching change and everything. And they were happy with the roster that they had and then peppered what they needed, which was, 2 guys in the offensive line and a wide receiver and Siaki Ika, and all of them. That's the other thing. There are teams that will take, probably 14, 15, like LSU is going to have to take 15 guys in the transfer portal. They're going to have to. Just to get their numbers up, maybe even more than that. Tennessee had to do it last year. Now, how many of those 15 guys are really going to contribute, and how many of them are just trying to get, well, look, we need 3 defensive backs. Well, who's the 3 best that we can get in the portal? And all 4 of the guys that came in contributed greatly to Baylor. They were 4 for 4.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I thought Estrada was solid, and there was a few plays he felt like maybe he could pop it. He never quite popped like the big play or the big special teams play, but he made some really solid catches for them that were important on multiple occasions, and helped move the chains. He was a good addition, and he ended up being, by when all was said and done, their number 3 receiver thereabouts, and definitely contributed in other ways outside of just catching the football too. And then the other 3 that you mentioned, Siaki Ika, he's heading full steam into being a first-round NFL draft pick. Not this year, but probably next year. If he keeps progressing the way that he is, a big nose like that, he's going to get a lot of looks from the NFL. So, and then the 2 offensive linemen who we now know are returning. That's 4 for 4, baby. And that's part of why you won the Big 12 championship and why you won the Sugar Bowl is because you nailed your roster additions. And, for a team that was 2 wins, last year, they had a pretty good roster, obviously. They 4 transfers in your recruiting class. That's all you really changed. And that same team won, 10 more games than they did the year prior, which is pretty insane. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see kind of how they dabble in the portal. How much do they do prior to spring? How much do they do post-spring? Because we know there's going to be post-spring activity as well. So they haven't done anything just yet. I think they're basking in the glow of the Sugar Bowl still, and why not? That was a big deal. And, a lot of others are out there selling, hope and whatnot, and they're selling hardware. So I don't know that they're in a real hurry, or maybe they've just found that guy just yet. But, man, a lot going on. Like, they're fresh off that game, and you get to take a little bit of a breath, but then you got to immediately start looking at the transfer portal. You got to start talking to your guys and talking about who's coming back, who's not. And he's got to start getting ready for this second signing day as well. So the grind never stops, but they've gotten really good news this week on the return front. R.J. Sneed's leaving. So there alone is a veteran wide receiver, that weakens your room a little bit. But outside of that, and I'm sure there will be other departures, but outside of that, you have to feel really great about the announced returns this week. I mean, that offensive line all coming back pretty much, 4 out of the 5. That's huge news. And you just need to get Blake Shapen healthy and make sure you got, what you need at every other position. And I think that offense will be good to go into your number 2.
Yeah, I agree with you, Craig. I think you've got, again, you got to figure out those wide receivers, and they've got some guys that were highly touted for sure. Jalen Ellis and Seth Jones and Jackson Gleason that they all felt good about when they came onto campus. We just haven't seen them yet. Monterey Baldwin and Hal Presley probably start out as starters in spring, I would think, because they played the most of those young guys. And then we'll see, where it falls in line after that. So this is a team that has more answers than questions, and I think that's a good thing. I think you want to have, like, I always said, like, if you have more than 5 questions that you don't have answers to, you're looking at a 6-6 year. If you have more than 5, then you've got a problem. But if you got 5, if you 5 or less, you're probably, Alabama never has any questions. Who's going to be that? Doesn't matter. Like, that's why they are who they are. But, as you go up, a team like Baylor, you have about 3 or 4 questions right now. What you're going to do in the transfer portal, who the wide receiver is going to be, who's the left guard going to be, and how do you replace some of the guys in the secondary. I think otherwise you're pretty good.
Yeah, you definitely have some, it's one thing to talk about the offense and just, pretty much every position at a tight end you might be taking a look. But I think, defense, you're taking a look everywhere. You replace Terrell Bernard and Jalen Petrie and JT Woods. I mean, that's a lot alone, just those 3 guys, and there's more. But, getting Christian Morgan back will be really good news for the safeties and for the defensive backs, because you were looking at there and they lose all their corners. Or at least, on paper, they lose Kalen Barnes, and then they'll lose Raleigh Tejada. And, good news would be that Al Walcott would be coming back, and he looks like he's well on his way to being a really good player for you, and had just an absolutely massive pick 6 in the Sugar Bowl. But then you worried about your safeties both being gone, and now Christian Morgan's returning. So technically you went from thinking your whole secondary might get wiped out to Al Walcott earning a starting job by the end, and Christian Morgan now coming back, and you actually have like 2 out of your 4, 2 out of your 5 DBs coming back. So that's better than expected. And, linebacker, you still have your Dylan Doyles and your Matt Joneses. Defensive line, Apu will be back, amongst others like Gabe Hall maybe is finally ready to take that next step. And I think they will need to probably, address maybe every position group with a guy or 2 through the portal or what have you. But, yeah, I mean, on paper, they look set up, and, doing those power rankings as well, just taking a look at how much changeover there's been at other schools already. I mean, Texas is going to flip like half their roster. I mean, really, they're going to have like 40 new guys on the roster next year. West Virginia, they've had if you count the guys who have already announced their decision or are just in the transfer portal, the number's like 20, dude. I mean, legitimately like 20 guys that were either in the portal or were in it and have chosen their new school. I mean, that's tremendous amount of turnover. And you got, Neil Brown on the hot seat there. Oklahoma, I mean, they're already churning that roster over, partly because they have to replace guys because so many of them bolted after Lincoln left and the season wrapped up. But now, obviously Venables wants to put his own touch on things as well, and they're having to recoup some of those losses. So they've already been hitting the portal hard in like the first week since he's really been on the job. Tex, going to the portal. I mean, everybody's going to be going to the portal and changing things up. And I think you look at it and depending on what happens the rest of the way, I mean, Baylor, for all the experience that they had, they might be one of the least turned over teams next year in the conference again. I mean, when you really look at it, roster-wise, they're not going to hit the portal as hard as some of these other teams already had, and they're not scheduled to lose as much as maybe some of these teams have already had. So, I kind of find that interesting that they could, if you take like the current roster and then what percentage is on it the next season, I think they'd be one of the higher teams on there most likely, barring some just unforeseen exodus of players. And that's really kind of fascinating in a way, because you think they would be one of the lowest just based on a run like this. Typically means you're going to be turning over that whole thing the following year due to seniors and all that. But with some of these announced returns, I mean, that's what, 4 offensive linemen, a safety, that's 5 guys in the last week alone that all are coming back. Yeah. So, I mean, that's 5 losses I was expecting potentially. Instead, it's 5 returns. So, that's big news for them.
All right.